Good afternoon, everyone. What a pleasure to welcome everyone to beautiful Nova Scotia. As this year's chair of the Council of the Federation, it's been an absolute thrill for me to welcome provincial and territorial premiers to my home province. It's been fun to show off our province, and of course from over 13,000 kilometers of coastline to some of the world's top golf courses, to our own Napa Valley of the East, and of course you can't come to Nova Scotia without trying some of the best seafood in the world. There is absolutely lots to see and do here in Nova Scotia. But this week was about getting to work, and it's always so helpful to spend time with other premiers, everyone in the same room, sharing their challenges in governing and the challenges they're facing, but also talking about solutions. This is a really collaborative table where we truly put politics to the side and we focus on what matters to Canadians. No matter where we live in this beautiful country, we're colleagues that focus on solving the pressing challenges that are facing our citizens, that are facing Canadians today, especially related to healthcare, housing, and affordability. There are also significant opportunities facing our country, particularly here in the energy sector, significant opportunities. Here in Nova Scotia alone, the economic potential for hydrogen and also critical minerals is measured in the billions. It's incredibly breathtaking. And it's also, as we gather, not lost on the group of premiers that emergency preparedness is more urgent than ever. Today alone, we see active wildfires in 5 provinces and territories. We also see flooding in Toronto. And of course, here in Nova Scotia, we had tragic flash floods just last week. There's no doubt that the climate is changing and it's impacting all of us. And to that end, we really want the federal government to work with us, to be partners as we invest in mitigation and also in recovery from these events. And we've talked a lot over the last couple of days about what we can do on all of these files. But we also, of course, talked a lot about the need for the federal government to respect our provincial jurisdiction. The current lack of collaboration from the federal government to the provinces and territories has resulted in missed opportunities, as we see federal programs that create duplicate processes that risk pitting provinces and territories, really Canadians, against one another. But really the big risk is just in not delivering on intended results. So there's a lot we can do to collaborate, because the current situation we have is not in the best interests of the Federation as a whole. So we asked the federal government to work with the provinces, to work with us as active partners with the provinces and territories when developing and executing federal programs. I want to personally thank each premier for their passion for their home province, for their citizens, and their passion for Canadians. And as we look ahead, I'm confident that these important discussions that we've had today and we will continue to have will benefit all Canadians. So thank you again to each of my colleagues and to each of their teams for being here. Premier Legault will deliver some comments in French, and then we'll be pleased to take your questions. Thank you.
So, bonjour tout le monde. Je veux commencer en remerciant Tim pour son accueil. On a été très bien accueillis depuis dimanche soir. Je sais que tu veux que je dise beaucoup de belles choses sur la Nouvelle-Écosse, mais bon, on me dit même que le Blue Nose 2 devrait passer derrière nous pendant qu'on parle. Je ne sais pas si ça va fonctionner, mais quand même. Mais c'est très beau, effectivement, on mange bien, puis très content. Merci de nous avoir accueillis. Aujourd'hui, on a continué à avoir des discussions sur les priorités des premiers ministres, des provinces et des territoires. On a discuté de santé, de sécurité, de relations entre le Canada et les États-Unis. Bon, on a beaucoup parlé, puis Tim vient de le dire, des empiètements du gouvernement fédéral dans les champs de compétences des provinces. C'est vraiment un problème qui s'accélère de budget en budget et évidemment, ce n'est pas comme ça qu'a été conçu la Fédération canadienne. Il y a des champs de compétences à Ottawa, des champs de compétences dans les provinces. Puis ces empiètements-là viennent créer des problèmes de gestion, viennent doubler la bureaucratie. C'est vraiment pas souhaitable pour les citoyens de voir ces empiètements. Je veux terminer en revenant un peu sur ce qu'on a discuté hier concernant les demandeurs d'asile. Je veux remercier mes collègues pour leur appui sur deux choses. Première chose, le fait qu'on ait convenu qu'il doit y avoir de la part du gouvernement fédéral un respect de la capacité d'accueil de demandeurs d'asile, puis carrément au Québec, cette capacité est dépassée. Et puis, j'étais content aussi qu'on se mette d'accord pour dire qu'il doit y avoir une juste répartition entre les provinces, en fonction justement de la capacité d'accueil de chacun. Donc, encore une fois, merci Tim.
Thank you.
Mike? Okay, there we go. We will now move to media questions, starting with media who are present, followed by questions from those attending virtually. For members of the media attending virtually, you may press *1 at any time to join the queue. We will now start with questions from media who are present in the room. Please come to the microphone, state your name, your outlet, and direct your question to one premier. You'll be limited to one question only.
My question is for Premier Ford and Premier Legault. Catherine Cullen from CBC News. BC and Newfoundland have said that the equalization formula is not fair. Premier Ford in particular, they've said it doesn't make sense that BC is sending money to Ontario when you don't have problems delivering basic services. Is the current situation fair in your mind?
Well, what I was saying, we contribute over $10.2 billion, and I've always said, as Ontario, the most populous province, that we need to support across the country in smaller provinces, and I think Ontario has shown that for the last 6 years. But it's a discussion that we're going to continue. But, you know, I always believe in Canada as one country supporting each other. We're a lot stronger when we work together. And I always say if we work together, we become an economic powerhouse around the world. And that's what we are. Again, I want to go back to first thank Premier Houston for his great leadership as chair, bringing everyone together throughout the year. And we're very grateful. But we all work together. Doesn't matter what political stripe you come from. We sit at that table and we come out united, and that's why I think the world of all these premiers are at the table.
Okay, the principles around equalization payments are that we want in Canada to be able to offer equivalent services in each province, and so there's a very complex formula where we take into consideration the fiscal capacity of each province, which is different. And at the end of the day, yes, you have 3 Atlantic provinces, Manitoba and Quebec. We receive some payments because we need this money to be able to offer equivalent services. Personally, well, Ontario received, but it's a very small amount, Doug, in per capita, because technically they are under the average. Very short, very almost equal to BC, but a bit under the average. But coming back to Quebec, my target since I'm premier is to get rid of equalization payments. I'm a proud guy, so I don't like that. And over the last 5 years, we've been able to reduce the percentage that Quebec received in equalization payment because we had a better growth in the GDP per capita than the rest of Canada. So I really hope long term that Quebec pays some equalization payments. But in the meantime, I think it's important that we respect the principles around the fact that we want to offer equivalent services to all Canadians.
Colton Pearl, CTV News. Specifically to Premier Ford, Premier Houston, Premier Legault, but really anybody who wants to weigh on this topic, please do. You mentioned specifically the need to hit that 2% NATO target in your communique, and we've heard a lot today about the impact with which U.S. trade is so significant for your provinces. Premier Kinew, earlier this morning you mentioned the need to hit that target sooner within the next U.S. administration. The federal timeline's 2032. The potential next Prime Minister has said that he can't commit to this target. How concerning is it for the provinces that not only is this such a far deadline that you may not even hit? How dangerous is it if we do see a Conservative government or if we don't see this target being hit within that next U.S. administration?
Thank you for the question. And I think it's, respective of who the government may be in Canada at any given point in time, I think it's really important that we honor our obligations on the world stage. And I think in terms of the NATO obligations and the 2%, a lot of the focus is on defense. But I think it's broader for Canada in its relationship with the United States. We're significant trading partners, and we want them to respect us fully in all aspects, including our ability to honor our obligations. So I think there was, and Premier Kinew raised it initially, and I think it was a good discussion along the lines of what might a U.S. administration, no matter who it is, how may they view Canada as a trading partner if Canada doesn't meet its international obligations. So I think that's a legitimate concern in a whole basket of concerns. I think it's meeting our obligations is just the right thing to do, and I think if we meet that obligation, we'll be looked upon more favorably, and that there will be other ramifications that would be positive as well for meeting the ramifications. So we thought, as premiers, it is really important. There's ways we can do that to meet the 2%. We need to think about the ways that we can possibly meet it too, in what the spending might be able to be put in that kind of basket, if you would, because some of it could be infrastructure in the north, as defense as well. So I think there are significant opportunities, and as a country, we need to recognize the importance of meeting that obligation, and the opportunities in how we can meet it, and the benefits that it can bring to Canadians, and also in the broader picture around trade in this case.
Tim, if I may as well, Arctic security and sovereignty has been a very important issue, and we had a very good discussion around the table. But there's an incredible opportunity that we're faced with in terms of the infrastructure gap we see between the north and the south, and the vulnerabilities we see. As northern premiers, we've really pushed it when we met in Mitimatalik up in Pond Inlet recently, and then when we met in Whitehorse as well as western premiers. But the opportunity to see investments specifically that are dual use. And I'll use Grays Bay Road and Port Project in the Western Arctic, which is at the mouth of the Northwest Passage, to use that as an incredible opportunity to not only serve the purpose of the Canadian Armed Forces or the Navy, but that of unlocking incredible critical mineral potential that is up in the north. So there's, I think, a generational opportunity before us to see these infrastructure come. We've had good discussions with Minister Blair, but I think at this point we need to see investment. There's good discussions, but it's investments that will speak. So we look forward to continuing to build that relationship with Ottawa to see those investments actually flow to the communities we serve. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Angel Moore, and I'm with APTN National News, and this message is for Premier Kinew. Nice to see you. The AFN is calling for an independent First Nations-led commission of inquiry into the deaths of Rebecca Contois, Morgan Harris, Mercedes Myron, and Buffalo Women, following the conviction of Jeremy Skibitsky of first-degree murder of their deaths. Do you support this call?
I want to begin by thanking Premier Houston for being a wonderful host and being an effective chair, and all my colleagues for having such a good discussion these past few days. I also want to take a moment, just as part of the call for the 2% NATO spending commitment, just to thank all of our Canadian Armed Forces members. Thank you for your service to our provinces and territories and country, and we think there's a way that we can do this that makes your jobs more supported, that gives you the equipment to do the important missions that you set out to do to protect our democracy. And we just also, as premiers, wanted to thank you for all of your assistance with wildfires and other emergency responses that you've provided. When it comes to searching the Prairie Green landfill, I always start with a note of compassion for the families. These are family members who've lost loved ones to one of the worst crimes that's ever been committed in our province. And they've been put through so much, having to sit through the courtroom and having the issue politicized, that I just want us to be there for them and to have their backs. So we will listen to the issues that they're bringing forward and the requests that they have here. And I think, importantly, we're taking action. We are searching the Prairie Green landfill. On June 27th, we did a pilot search. We were able to recover material, newspapers that are more than a year old. You can read the headline, the date line, you can read the text of the article. And that sends us a signal that this search does have a chance, and I hope that that provides hope to the families. And importantly, we're working on prevention. We're investing $20 million in MMIWG2S Plus initiatives this year. We're bringing forward future measures to ensure that garbage trucks and other parts of the waste collection service will be better monitored. And at the end of the day, let's work together as Manitobans and as Canadians so that something awful like this doesn't happen again.
Hello, Kat Tunney from CBC. Happy to hear anyone on this, but if I have to be succinct and directed at one person, I suppose the chair. We're hearing this call to speed up the NATO benchmark, that's billions more annually. You're also calling for more infrastructure spending and more immigration supports. So I guess, frankly, are you guys asking for too much?
I think we're asking for focus. We're asking for the federal government to be partners with us on initiatives that they kind of dream up and want to execute on, which are well-intentioned for the most case, but we want them to be our partner and recognize our jurisdiction. There's a lot that the people at this table are responsible for, and we're focused on it. We want to deliver results for our citizens and for Canadians. And if you take our focus and extrapolate it further to the federal government, we have common goals, and we can achieve more if we work together. But there's absolutely no question that just like there are items kind of in our jurisdiction, there are items in the federal jurisdiction too. And defense spending and some of these things are really important. Support for infrastructure investments, really important. So, I mean, when we see the federal government stopping an infrastructure program without a replacement and not working with the provinces on what, on that, it kind of leaves a lurch. And if we look to the longer term on some of the initiatives that they've come forward with, childcare, dental care, well-intentioned initiatives, but what happens if the federal government stops those funding? So this is a table, we manage our own budgets and we look to the long term, and we ask the federal government to look to the long term as well when they're making decisions and be partners with us. These things cost money for sure, but we need to be focused on the how and the where that money is invested. We have a lot of ideas on that, and we hope that they listen to us.
If I may, I'll just add to that as well. The program that they canceled was a $33 billion program over 10 years. And one of the best things about programs like that is that we can match them and that our municipalities can match them. So if they had created a new version of the Investing in Community Infrastructure program, that would allow for potentially unlocking $100 billion worth of investment in infrastructure. And I think the point that our territorial leaders have made is that if you're co-locating strategic infrastructure with economic infrastructure, building ports and building roads and building staging areas for unmanned aerial vehicles. These are the ways that you can invest in for a dual purpose. So not only build out the necessary infrastructure from an economic point of view in the territories and the Arctic, but also be able to probably have that count towards our NATO commitment. In addition, the Canadian Armed Forces did a tremendous job last year for us in firefighting, investing in making sure that they are trained to be able to manage local either wildfire response or flood response. That could also be another way of us investing in a dual role for our armed forces, making sure we have a force at the ready for when they need to be deployed, but in the meantime, able to be deployed to assist with what we know are going to be continued issues of dealing with natural disasters. And I guess the third area is that each one of us have areas of investment. In our province, for instance, we've got multiple bases, but we also have an unmanned aerial vehicle, aerospace, and defense industry that is growing. And so if we can get some of that investment in those industries in our respective provinces, that may also help towards our NATO goals. So I think the federal government just has to be maybe a little more creative in how they're looking at this investment and use the partnership with the provinces and and territories and municipalities as a catalyst for us to be able to achieve that target earlier.
Thanks. It's Chris Rochelle from the Toronto Star. My question is for Premier Doug Ford. Looking ahead, you're taking over as chair of the Council of the Federation. You've talked about easier and faster access to medications, but what other priorities will you have over the next year? What issues do you need to keep the pressure up on?
Well, as I was mentioning to the other premiers as we move forward, this is a very powerful table in the way of the economy, driving the economy forward collectively to benefit every single Canadian through the territories and the provinces. We do feel the critical medications that we're taking over 732 days, life-saving medications. We need to get that approved. We're the last in the G7, and we always are looking for infrastructure funds and collaboration. As Premier Smith just said, it adds economic development when we all work together on 3 different levels, municipal, provincial, and federal, to stir the economy. We're going to be working with our U.S. counterparts, our #1 trading partner. We do, hopefully we'll plan a trip as a new administration, whoever it might be, gets sworn in. And we'll go down there and have a conversation with the new administration, the new secretaries, and going back to, it's not just buy American, buy U.S., it's about buy North American. Again, I'll repeat it, we are an economic powerhouse around the world. Canada is. We punch way above our weight. We are a nuclear powerhouse around the world. We're going to talk about energy and how we will have enough energy and enough to even supply to the U.S., because that's always a concern down there. Critical minerals is very, very important for North America. And again, no matter if it's clean, green energy, the Democrats get elected or the Republicans are focusing on the U.S. military, they're going to need our critical minerals. Right now, China has cornered the market on a lot of critical minerals. I'll give you one example, is nickel. They cornered the market worldwide, about 90% of the nickel they've cornered, and we need that. We need our nickel to support our closest allies around the world. And that's going to be the message that we come out and speak to our counterparts. And hopefully it's going to move forward. They aren't going to slap tariffs like they tried last time, but I have all the confidence in the world with the folks at the table right here. We're going to do very, very well as a country.
Jesse Thomas with CTV News here in Halifax. I have a question relating Canada-U.S. relations for the maritime premiers, please, if you will. We're looking at the election closely as it's approaching, and I'm wondering what harsh economic taxes or the tariffs on exports from the Maritimes would mean for the economy here, and in particular, what exports would we need to protect to continue to have a thriving economy in the Maritimes?
I would begin, certainly as Premier of Prince Edward Island, we rely very, very heavily to the tune of, close to $750 million a year with trade with the United States, largely in the northeastern part of the U.S. So whether that's potatoes, seafood, some aerospace, there's lots of components within that. I would not rush to judgment. I know that there is an election taking place and there will be a lot of discussion around, as Premier Ford talked about, Buy America and some of these more protectionist issues. But we've been doing business with the United States for a century or more now. So I feel there's a way for us to work through this. The United States is reliant on Canada for good, regular, everyday trade. They need our products as much as we need them to buy them and vice versa. So I understand there is a rush to judgment on all of these things, but I think it's best for us, certainly the approach for Prince Edward Island is we're going to let the United States and the people of the United States decide who will represent them, and it will be our job, just like it's the job of the other 12 premiers and I, to work with whoever is in Ottawa or whoever was in the provincial capitals, regardless of their political stripe, is to try to find common ground to work upon, but knowing that we need each other in this relationship day to day, and hopefully we can elevate it, Jesse, from a talking point or a political talking point to just everyday common sense and the need we have for each other to be successful.
I think that certainly more than ever, given the conditions that exist around the world, it's more important that we become one as North America in relation to our joint approach to national issues, international issues. And I think for a long, long time, we've been very, very close to the U.S. and aligned as certainly our major trading partner, our closest trading partner. And I know that in the past number of years, we looked at diversification of that around the world. But there's a basis now, I think, to reflect on, okay, how do we kind of bridge some of the current gaps that may exist? For us in New Brunswick, certainly forestry, energy, whether it be current forms of energy or whether it be future forms of energy in the way of nuclear or hydro, the importance for us to be aligned in North America have never been stronger. And I think that any new administration that comes in, new or existing administration that comes into the U.S. over the coming months, will understand that we are in a bigger battle now around the world, and it's more important than ever that we be aligned in our purpose, and we have an opportunity to do that. And I certainly see that with my colleagues here as we focus on national issues. In many ways, focusing on issues that should be of a federal concern. And, as we were talking amongst ourselves, it certainly seems that we are kind of replacing the federal government in many ways on some of the issues that are really important to our country.
I get to join the maritime provinces, I guess. Thank you, Tim. First of all, thanks, Tim, for hosting such a great meeting, and thanks to the people in Nova Scotia for just being incredible hosts. It's not about the beautiful backdrop or the beautiful boats. It's about the people, and you got some of the best here, and we're grateful for having such a warm welcome. For us in Newfoundland and Labrador, we believe that we have what the world needs right now, and we believe that regardless of the administration in Washington, D.C., that they'll see the benefits of what we have, and we have the intersection of renewable and non-renewable energy sources. So specifically to your point, it's important for us to understand from our federal government how the ITC is going to work in relation to the IRA more fulsomely, and I think that's an important conversation to have moving forward, depending on who occupies the White House. But our non-renewable, which we're incredibly proud of, our oil and gas product will continue to flow to the United States as our largest trading partner, and hopefully, regardless of who the president is, they can appreciate that that's an important component to their supply chain. We have an abundance of critical minerals that's going to be important as the geopolitical landscape shifts and the tensions shift. To François and to Doug's point about who controls the supply chain on the entire energy matrix is important, and I think regardless of the political stripe in the White House, those are going to be important conversations. But from Newfoundland and Labrador's perspective, to Dennis's point, we will work with whoever's in Washington, D.C., because we know that we have not just what Canada needs, not just what North America needs in Newfoundland and Labrador, but what the world needs. And I think that will be reflected in any U.S. administration.
Bonjour, Sébastien Desrosiers de Radio-Canada. Oh, sorry.
Oh, you're fine. I was just gonna echo. I mean, these are traditional trading routes and long-standing relationships with important products back and forth. So I'm confident that the new administration, whoever that may be, will see that too.
Sorry again. Sébastien Desrosiers de Radio-Canada. Ma question est pour vous, M. Legault. Donc, la Colombie-Britannique et Terre-Neuve et Labrador veulent entreprendre un recours judiciaire pour forcer Ottawa à revoir la formule de péréquation qui, dans l'état actuel des choses, favorise le Québec. Le Québec, cette année, reçoit un peu plus de 13 des 25 milliards distribués par Ottawa. Si on additionne les subventions d'Ottawa à la filière batterie, votre collègue, M. Eby, est même d'avis que vous bénéficiez d'un traitement spécial de la part du gouvernement fédéral. Je ne sais pas ce que vous pensez de ça. Mais si on revient à ce recours judiciaire, combien ça pourrait coûter au Québec? Quelle menace ça représente dans le court terme?
Bon, d'abord, il faut distinguer la péréquation des autres programmes. Effectivement, David a raison. Prenons l'exemple des demandeurs d'asile. Pourquoi le Québec reçoit 750 millions, puis les autres provinces ne reçoivent rien? Peut-être ça les inciterait à en prendre plus de demandeurs d'asile. Puis d'ailleurs, en passant, il y en a plusieurs qui sont ouverts à en prendre plus, en autant qu'ils reçoivent de l'argent du fédéral. Puis moi, je l'ai déjà dit, notre problème principal dans ce dossier-là, c'est pas l'argent, c'est qu'il nous manque d'enseignants, il nous manque de logements, il nous manque d'infirmières, puis ça pose un problème pour le français. Donc, les programmes fédéraux qu'il y ait une équité entre les provinces. Moi, j'en suis. Dans certains dossiers, on pense aussi que parfois on est pénalisé quand on compare avec ce que reçoivent d'autres provinces. Maintenant, la péréquation, c'est complètement différent. C'est un programme qui vient s'assurer que chaque province ait les moyens d'offrir des services équivalents partout au Canada. Et ça ne concerne pas juste le Québec. Il y a la Nouvelle-Écosse, le Nouveau-Brunswick, l'île du Prince-Édouard, le Manitoba et le Québec qui reçoivent la péréquation. C'est important qu'on continue de recevoir cette péréquation pour être capable d'offrir des services équivalents. Par contre, comme je l'ai souvent dit, puis vous le savez, mon objectif à long terme, c'est que le Québec n'en reçoive plus de péréquation en créant de la richesse. Puis une de mes grandes fiertés depuis 5 ans, c'est qu'on a eu une croissance économique du PIB par habitant plus grande au Québec que dans le reste du Canada. Donc, en pourcentage, le montant que le Québec reçoit comme péréquation a été diminué. Mais je pense que c'est au cœur de ce qu'est le Canada. C'est sûr que c'est une formule qui est complexe, là. Il y a 34 critères qui sont utilisés, mais le principe important, c'est d'avoir des capacités fiscales équivalentes une fois qu'on tient compte de la péréquation. Puis honnêtement, je pense que si demain matin, on commençait à négocier province par province pour changer la formule, on ne s'entendrait jamais. Donc, je pense qu'il faut garder la formule actuelle. Je ne veux pas parler pour les autres, là, mais je pense qu'on a au moins 5 provinces qui pensent comme ça. Puis comme je le disais tantôt, le montant que reçoit l'Ontario, c'est un très petit montant per capita comparativement à ce qu'on reçoit. Puis je suis sûr qu'avec Doug, il n'y en aura pas pour longtemps.
Heidi Petracek with Global National. Premier Legault, this question is also for you. Just wondering which leaders, provincial territorial leaders here have indicated to you that they are ready and willing to accept more asylum seekers.
You're asking me if they want to accept more, so you should ask the question to them, not to me.
I asked if they've indicated to you. Which ones have
but
indicated
I think
to
you should ask them. But like I just said in French, I think it would help if the federal government give them at the same time some money to transfer asylum seekers to their territories or provinces. And it's a bit funny to say that, but it's not fair that Quebec receives $750 million for them, and they receive nothing. I would prefer to receive less in the future and have less asylum seekers.
I think when it comes to asylum seekers, both Quebec and Ontario share the brunt of it. And we're just asking the federal government to give our fair share. We've spent over $1 billion in Ontario every single year. And I talk to these folks. I have quite a few of them up in my riding, and they want to work. They want a better life. And it's taking way too long to get a working visa from the federal government. We've received, just Toronto has received about 162 million, but we're spending over $1 billion. So we need the working visa for these folks as quickly as possible, rather than sticking them in a hotel that they do on the airport strip up in Toronto in a little room with a couple kids. It's, you know, and they're down playing in the parking lot. It's heartbreaking. They want a better life. They want to work like everyone else and contribute to society. They're really good folks, but we have to make sure we have shelter. We need homes for them, so we really need the support from the federal government. That's really what it comes down to.
Au Manitoba, nous serons prêts d'accueillir des nouveaux arrivants, surtout de la francophonie, mais nous avons besoin de l'aide du gouvernement fédéral. Nous avons des défis avec les logements abordables, avec le système de santé. Mais si le gouvernement fédéral est là pour nous aider, nous pourrons être capables de collaborer avec soit le Québec ou les autres provinces pour améliorer cette situation et puis accueillir du monde qui ont besoin d'aide. So just to get back to your original question, in Manitoba, we would be prepared to accept some of these asylum seekers, in particular Francophones. We're always looking to support our Francophone community in Manitoba and to ensure that there's continued immigration in that space, but we can only do it if there's help from the federal government. We have the housing needs, the healthcare and social needs in Manitoba, and so in order for us to be able to
To follow on my colleagues' questions there, we've heard from Manitoba, Newfoundland, and Labrador. I'd like to hear from any other premiers that have agreed to accept more asylum seekers and how many you're prepared to accept.
We find ourselves in Alberta in a very similar position to Quebec in that we have about just under 12% of the population, but we're now accepting 22% of the newcomers. And so I've watched with interest that the federal government was able to provide support to Quebec. We've seen the same thing, in particular with Ukrainian evacuees. I believe we've now have 70,000 who have settled in Alberta so far. And aside from a small amount of money at the beginning, there's hotels that need to be funded, there's schools that need to be funded, there's a healthcare plan that we're funding, there's a whole variety of additional programs. And we want to do our part. But I think that similar to Quebec, when one province is shouldering a larger burden than can very reasonably be accommodated with existing infrastructure, it puts pressure on housing. We're going flat out building housing. We've increased our housing 60% construction year over year, which allows us to accommodate 100,000 new people every year. We had 200,000 people that came to Alberta last year. We have increased our education, so we're spending more on education than we ever have before. We have 22,500 students that are new that are unfunded at the moment. It puts a lot of pressure on jurisdictions who are receiving more than their current level of social programs and infrastructure can support. So I'm finding Alberta similar to where Quebec is at.
I would add to this as well. I think that we've all experienced significant population increases, and while proportional acceptance of refugees or asylum seekers is certainly appropriate for all of us, it's finding the balance here as we can manage this with as Premier Smith said, the housing construction, and understanding the criteria around much of our immigration policy, because I think we're all kind of bursting at the seams in relation to keeping up with housing. We're getting the pushback from many citizens about the cost and the affordability and the availability. And so, we certainly ask as a group here, what is the criteria? How do we manage this coming forward? Because it has to be some sort of recognition that we can only manage so much. We want to be compassionate and receive as many people as we possibly can, but we have to find a place for them to go when they get here. And so as we work with the federal government to determine the actual immigration policies, the requirements that are needed in each province in order to meet the demands that are going to be put upon us. Right now, our situation has increased threefold in the last few years, and that's significant for us because it's just one component of a population increase that's over 10%. So it's a balanced approach, but we need to understand the criteria around our entire immigration policy.
Yeah, I know from our standpoint, for the Yukon nominee program, which was all jurisdictions have a program that we use, which is really around economic immigration. Within the first 3 months of this year, we had hit the amount of folks that we had available to come in through IRCC. So I think the dialogue at the table was also, as Blaine just said, we have to take a look at the entire system. We had a challenge in Canada. It's going to affect all of us. It was really around post-secondary institutions that were bringing in students. We saw, an immense amounts of students coming into Ontario, Quebec, and BC. But those students are now going all across the country trying to find places to become Canadians. They filled significant holes in our workforce, but now they're going to be running out in the next 2 to 3 years, if not right now. So we're going to be losing workers. We don't have a strategy to keep them in our provinces and territories. So I think part of what we're trying to do is urge the federal government to say, look, it's not just, there's implications to these quick decisions you've made, and they're going to affect our economy, and we have to take into consideration how we're going to have an overall strategy that's going to put us in a place now, but also future-proof where we go with our workforce and how we deal with asylum seekers and folks coming through our economic immigration programs as well.
Oh, sorry. I thought British Columbia was going to say something. Hi, I'm Nathan Horn with allnovascotia.com. My question I've directed to Premier Houston. You guys recently had a letter to the federal government sort of outlining how you wanted them to kind of stay out of certain areas such as education, housing, and healthcare, unilateral decisions rather, not being made. I'm just wondering, how do you reconcile that when, considering like how, for instance, the Halifax municipality has said that the province isn't doing enough? How does that work?
So you're asking a question, so we want the federal government to restrict its kind of meddling, I guess, to federal government issues and leave provincial jurisdiction issues to the provinces. That's what we want. And we want them to be our partner and support us. Are you asking a question that municipalities aren't saying the provinces aren't doing enough?
Well, yeah, like basically, how do you respond to that? What they're saying, like they're suggesting that you're not doing enough, but the federal government, maybe they could come in and kind of work together with you. Does that contradict the, sort of not making unilateral decisions comment from the letter, that's all.
No, not at all. I guess what I would say, just as a general point, and every premier here would have similar experiences, but it's very unlikely that the federal government could partner with a municipality on any project that wouldn't ultimately involve the province paying some portion of it or having some involvement. So trying to do an end around on certain things, and housing is an obvious example, where the federal government goes direct to a municipality to try and cut some deal on something. It's just not productive in the grand scheme of things. And we just ask them to respect our jurisdiction, work with us, and we'll pull in other partners, which are municipalities are valued partners for sure. We can all work together. Just trying to exclude one of those parties from the table doesn't make sense, and we just want them to focus on their issues, and we'll focus on ours, and we'll get along just fine.
Thank you.
Can I just add, the second part of that is things like the school food lunch program, for example. It's a wonderful mom and pop type issue for the federal government to want to have a role in, but jurisdictions such as Prince Edward Island and others have had a pay what you can K-12 school lunch program since 2021. So I would certainly welcome and continue to make the offer to the federal government to come in and partner with us. So maybe we can expand it, maybe we can improve the offerings, maybe we can buy much more local if we have to pay a little more for it. We've extended our school lunch program into the summer for those families who struggle on a daily basis, that we provide some. And that's just one example of what we talk about, this jurisdictional creep, so to speak. We all at this table, and I think every Canadian would expect that all of their levels of government should try to pitch in and do everything they can to make their lives a little bit easier. But it gets just a little bit frustrating with the duplication and the overstepping, so to speak, of the federal government. The dental care program is another example where if they could just partner with a jurisdiction such as ours, who has done a very good job with the provincial dental care program, that we could probably exceed the goals of which the federal government has set. So when we talk about, when Premier Houston talks about the jurisdictional creep, this is what we're talking about. We're not asking the federal government to butt out. We're asking them to say, let's get to the table together. Let's understand from your jurisdiction the same way Tim or I would do that with our municipalities, to say, what do you need? How can we work together to achieve it? And at the end, keep people at the focus of this, and how can we best deliver the best results for Islanders and Canadians.
Yeah, I want to jump on this breakfast program. I think it's a great program, but here's an example. When the federal government, they spend $1 billion over 5 years feeding 400 kids. Our program in Ontario delivers almost 90 million meals and snacks to more than 600,000 school-age children, and our annual funding is 38 million. Like, something's broken. They're wasting taxpayers' money. Go through the provinces, and you know what happens? The premiers get pissed. Simple as that. And they jump in there, and they think they know better than what we know, and we deal with it on a daily basis. So throwing that sort of money around and just tossing checks around without any accountability, there's a perfect example how we can feed more children than what they can do there.
Andrew Rankin with the Chronicle Herald. I'm just wondering, Premier Houston, if you're leaving this meeting with any ideas about how to get people off the street and encampments and into housing quickly, like emergency housing, and what steps are you taking as Premier to ensure that money is going, that the money that you're that money going into housing is actually is ensuring that it's getting into, that it's being invested in deeply affordable housing?
Thanks very much for the question. And look, the housing crisis that we feel and others feel as well, the solution to the housing crisis is housing across the entire spectrum. That's why in this province we've invested in student housing. campuses at the NSCC will have student housing. That hadn't happened in a couple of decades. The first investments in public housing are happening under our governments in a long time. And of course, speeding up the process for getting permits to build housing. Some projects that have been being discussed for a decade, we're bringing them to either a yes or a no. It's time to get going. But we know that building housing requires people. That's why we have the MOST program, the more opportunities for skilled trades, which under that program, anyone who's under 30 working in a skilled trade doesn't pay any personal provincial income tax on their first 50 grand. So there are lots of initiatives, all focused on housing. In terms of the homelessness issue itself, like significant investments in this province in wraparound supports, in shelter space. In this city, in Halifax where we're at, there's open shelters beds, but people living in tents. So we want to get those people inside the shelters where the full supports are there. So there's lots of work happening, and we feel, having people live outside and live rough, it weighs on all of us. Every single person feels that, and we're all working hard for solutions to support those people, and we'll continue to do that.
The blue nose is there.
Hi, my name is Lindsay Jones, and I'm with the Globe and Mail. And my question, okay, I'm sorry, I'm switching questions. Just got text. We heard about Premier Furey and the BC Premier asking about, or suggesting they're going to launch lawsuits around equalization payments. Are there any other premiers that are considering or want to speak about that issue today?
Well, in Alberta, we had a referendum saying that we should take equalization out of the Constitution. We feel like the formula is fundamentally broken. Last year, I put forward a paper about how we might be able to modify it to better match what it was supposed to be, roughly equivalent tax rates, delivering roughly equivalent programs, rather than overcompensating some provinces and underreporting certain sources of revenue. So I'm very interested to see the lawsuit that Newfoundland and BC are joining together. We take a bit of a different approach. I don't know necessarily that I want the Supreme Court deciding this solution, the answer to this. I think it's up to us at this table to come together with a new formula that will work for all of us, and hopefully be able to have a partner in the federal government who will modify it. But I can tell you, I don't believe that those who proposed this formula ever thought that a small province like Newfoundland and Labrador would be a net payer and that large provinces would be net recipients. I think that in itself demonstrates that the formula isn't working. So I'll be watching the court case with interest, but we've expressed our concern with equalization for some time.
And Saskatchewan has indicated some time ago that they'll be intervening in this case as well. As you know, the equalization formula around this table has been talked about for a number of years. Saskatchewan, I wouldn't say unique, but does have the situation where, a couple of decades ago, we were on the receiving end of the equalization formula. In the last 15 or so years, we have not been. So we've seen the formula from both sides. But certainly, it's Saskatchewan's view, and we had put forward, it's Saskatchewan's view that there are flaws to the formula on what's included in the calculations, the per capita, and this is a little bit different view that Premier Furey has put forward with respect to the actual equalization of services that are being offered across Canada. So we've expressed our intention to intervene in this particular case. We've also, in years gone by, put forward an alternative option, which is our view that there are flaws to the formula, and we had put forward a 50-50 option where 50% would be of the equalization dollars would be allocated on a per capita basis, and 50% through the existing formula, and it would be our view then it would be about half as flawed as it is today. But we will be intervening in the case as well.
Hello, Premiers. Judy Trin with CTV National News. Following the loss of the Liberals in the Toronto stronghold of St. Paul's, Prime Minister Trudeau said that he would listen to Canadians and that he would make life more affordable. And he wanted to listen to his caucus members about what policies to put forward that would enable his party to do that. What would you tell Prime Minister Trudeau about what policy, one single policy, that he could put forward that would make an immediate change and difference in the affordability for Canadians? I'd like to start my direction for the question to Premier Kinew. You mentioned earlier about reducing the gasoline tax. Are you also can you clarify, are you saying that you would like to see the federal government pause the 10% excise tax on gasoline?
My comment was about, we had a 14 cents a liter tax on gasoline and diesel in Manitoba, and on January 1st of this year, we cut it to zero. And since then, we've had the lowest inflation rate in the country each month. And so I think that this is a significant step that we were able to take to put money back in the pockets of hardworking people in Manitoba. It's something that people confront each and every day when they go to work, at work. It's something that helps business as well. And we're taking steps on the environmental side to ensure that we're helping people to make the climate-friendly choice with transportation and with home heating. But the point that we always make is that if we don't show the flexibility in this current cost of living crisis, we're going to lose Canadians who would otherwise be open to that climate-friendly choice. And so in order to keep moving forward on the environment, we have to show flexibility on the cost of living. And I think that the federal government needs to think very, very carefully about that. And we're clear that we're going to be able to get to net zero in Manitoba without a carbon tax. And so I think I would encourage the federal government to look more at the positive incentives that they can offer towards a climate-friendly future rather than causing people economic pain. And juste pour ajouter en français au défi de l'OTAN, pour moi, c'est important d'avoir cet investissement dans le militaire ici dans le Canada, parce que si on n'est pas à ce niveau vers l'OTAN d'avoir le 2%, ça ne va pas juste être un défi sécuritaire, ça va être un défi économique. Et nous avons besoin d'avoir une relation très forte avec les États-Unis. So just to recap, like the NATO 2% thing I think is very significant because I want Canadians to think of this for sure as an investment in our military and in defense, but this is also an economic investment. And if we don't make this investment, the next U.S. administration is likely to cause, some consternation when it comes to the super important relationship with U.S. trade that creates jobs and economic opportunities across Canada.
I'll just add to that because last year we were the lowest in inflation rate when we didn't have our fuel tax on either. We went for 2 years with a reprieve on the fuel tax, costing our Treasury $2 billion. I believe you see it now with the reprieve on fuel tax in Manitoba, lowest inflation rate, and I believe as well with the reprieve on the fuel tax on home heating in Saskatchewan, they also have a low inflation rate. I mean, now we have 3 cases right there that reducing the cost of living can be directly tied to the cost of base fuels. And the federal government, there's only so much provinces can do. The federal government has greater means. We can't keep cutting our own sources of revenue because the federal government refuses to cut theirs. All of us use our fuel taxes for upgrading roads, and that becomes a major priority, especially since they didn't come through with transportation infrastructure in this last budget. So I think it's pretty clear that if they wanted to make an immediate difference, they would recognize the knock-on costs that the carbon tax is having on transportation of everything, on food costs, on heating costs for retail stores and everything we purchase. And that's part of the reason why we're having such a difficult time keeping the inflation rate low. So it's up to the federal government now, I believe, to give us a fuel tax break. We've been advocating in Alberta to cut the tax, and we think that it's demonstrated that will have an immediate impact.
We can't talk about the cost of living without talking about the North, which has the highest cost of living in Canada. In terms of what policies we'd like to see, I'd like to see the federal government recognize that when they are developing policies or programs, that the North needs special consideration because we are unique. We also need investment. We're facing a situation right now, climate change has resulted in the lowest water we've ever seen on the Mackenzie River. For those of you who don't know, that's essentially our highway. A number of communities receive their annual resupply through that river, up that river, and this year the water is too low to get barges up there. So we are now in a situation where we have communities that are essentially stranded. We need to fly in goods, which is going to, in many cases, double the costs that consumers are going to be paying in the grocery store. It's holding up construction of new infrastructure. It's a serious issue that we are facing. And so what we need is special consideration, and we need investments in these nation-building projects like the Mackenzie Valley Highway. And I think that we can look at the 2% NATO target as well. And projects like this add to national security. They add to national defense. They'll give us access. They'll improve access to critical minerals and to rare earth elements. And so there's a number of things that the federal government can do to lower the cost of living in the north. Thank you.
For British Columbia, there's been a lot of asks along this table for the federal government to step up and support Canadians in different provinces, a lot of spending asks. So I'll put forward two that don't cost any money. One is that the federal government should join British Columbia in, frankly, calling on the Bank of Canada to lower interest rates. I know the bank needs to be free from political interference, and they should be. But the bank is clearly not recognizing the impact of their high interest rates on costs facing Canadians, especially in British Columbia. We look at what's driving inflation in our province, it is overwhelmingly the cost of housing. And what is driving the cost of housing? High interest rates. We've had rental housing projects put on hold because of high interest rates, meaning there's less rental housing at a time that we've added 180,000 people to our province last year. We've got people facing massive and staggering interest rate costs on their debts related to mortgages, related to other borrowing that they have, and it is profoundly damaging the Canadian economy. It's damaging the economy in British Columbia. That is the intention of a high interest rate policy, is to damage the economy so people have less money, they spend less money. But now we're in a situation where high interest rates are driving high housing costs, which are driving high inflation, and it is a vicious cycle that has to stop. They have to recognize how their policy is actually impacting people on the ground. That's number one. Number two is equalization. And we held a Unimic with Newfoundland and Labrador to talk about this. But I will acknowledge that it is very hard for British Columbians to be paying into a program right now at a time when they're facing serious cost of living concerns. The federal program, they're paying their federal taxes to fund it. When that program is no longer related to the core goal of ensuring the same level of services across Canada. British Columbians want to do their part. Every province, every person in every province deserves high quality health care and schools and so on. But that is clearly not what the program is doing anymore. And so revisiting that formula to reduce the obligations on provinces that are contributing, on taxpayers and provinces that are contributing, to ensure that the program is actually reflecting the intention in the Constitution. Those two things don't cost the federal government any money, will significantly improve the quality of life of British Columbians and the costs that they face.
From Newfoundland and Labrador's perspective, it's good to go after everybody else because they've used a couple of mine. But just to reiterate, it's important, I think, for the federal government to understand the impact in Atlantic Canada of the clean fuel standards and how that translates not to just a direct price at the pump, but the indirect costs. And for those who may not be familiar with it, that's not contemplated in the carbon rebate. So I know there's some debate on that, but clean fuels specifically is more punitive in Atlantic Canada. And something that also wouldn't cost any money, but I think is incumbent upon the federal government to reflect on, is our precious offshore cod fishery. And I know that may be specific to Newfoundland, but Newfoundland and Labrador, but that was one that I think we're taking a provincial approach here. They have, by lifting the cod moratorium, it's something we should celebrate, but by doing so, they have invited Russian trawlers off our shores. This is a resource that has been nursed back to good health by the people of Newfoundland and Labrador, and it does not deserve to be caught by Russian trawlers, and no offense to any other foreign countries. This resource belongs to Canadians, it belongs to Newfoundlanders and Labradorians, and if you want to increase the economic impact and an economic driver in our rural communities, it's important that we own that resource. We catch that resource. The fishermen who stood on the sidelines and watched this resource grow now have the opportunity to harvest it. To the rural communities who emptied after the cod moratorium, have a chance to rebuild, to realize a sustainable economic opportunity in a rural community in Newfoundland and Labrador. It is unacceptable in Canada and Newfoundland and Labrador, but in Canada more broadly, that especially in this time of geopolitical tensions, that there is the possibility that a Russian trawler could be off the shores of Newfoundland and Labrador taking a single fish. It is a way that they can impact the economy of Newfoundland and Labrador, but more specifically, the fishermen, the processors who live in rural and remote communities.
You will see much diversity across the country, and I'd say the recommendation from Saskatchewan's perspective would be twofold. The first would be to remove the consumer carbon tax on everything for everyone. I don't think that would surprise anyone here. And second would be to look very, very seriously at the 2% commitment that we have as a nation for a host of reasons. So first, on the consumer carbon tax, Canadians are struggling with affordability. They're struggling with the inflationary rates that we are facing across this nation. And part of what is driving that inflationary rate is, yes, the interest rates, but it's also the cost on fuel. And particularly in Saskatchewan, I would say it is largely the cost on fuel, which multiple areas of the nation have made different decisions, arriving at much similar savings for the residents that they represent to ensure that life is more affordable from a provincial perspective and from a provincial action point. Us and Manitoba currently have the lowest inflationary rate in Canada, largely due to reducing the cost of either driving our children to work, or driving our children to school or to their sporting activities, or in Saskatchewan's case, where we removed mirrored the federal government's decision on removing the carbon tax from home heating, natural gas, and electricity, saving about an equivalent amount for Saskatchewan residents and resulting in a much lower inflationary rate than we see across Canada. The 2% investment in military funding, I think, is important. One, because we've made the obligation to do it as Canadians. Two, I would say in what is a very unrestful world, we're seeing conflicts in Eastern Europe and in other areas of the world that I think that the investment is necessary as we look forward in ensuring our security, and we're taking care of our own security here in this nation, and really participating in North American not only general security, but working alongside, and this will be a topic of discussion regardless of who is the administration in the U.S. as we move forward for North American general security, but also will have impacts on the conversation around how we continue to provide North Americans with food security and the rest of the world, but ensuring that we also have energy security on our continent. And so I think this is should be of the utmost priority for either this Canadian current administration or the next in prioritizing our investment in our own general security. One, because we said that we would do it. Two, because of what we see happening globally. And three, it most certainly is going to have an impact, positive or negative, with our ongoing relationship with the U.S. And I think over the course of the next number of months, you're going to see this table, which collectively also represents all Canadians from coast to coast to coast, taking a significant interest in utilizing the collective contacts and relationships that we have as subnational leaders throughout the U.S., relying on those relationships that we have in advancing the Canada-U.S. broader relationship, whether it be on trade, whether it be on general security, or whether it be on providing North Americans with energy and food security into the future.
Thank you. That's all the time we have today. C'est tout le temps dont nous disposons aujourd'hui. Thank you for joining us. Merci de vous être joints à nous.